Hello and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns podcast for May 2nd, 2025. My name is Tom Luongo. We have a lot to talk about. It is episode 217. And after the last four podcasts where I had Kayla Long and then Brent Johnson and then Vince Lanci, and then tying up all that kind of financial plumbing and the stable coins and all that stuff. We had Ian Burlingame on earlier in the week to kind of give us a historical perspective on things. And now I wanted to reconnect with a guy I met about a month and a half ago or so. Stormy Waters is going to be with me here today. We're going to talk about things from all of these things that we've been noticing and the way that I think the world is fundamentally changing underneath our feet. From a slightly different perspective. And you and I were just trying to set up this podcast before we started. And we're like, oh, what are we going to talk about? And Stormy really did a nice job of like throwing an idea out at people to frame this, which is so much of what we talk about is not necessarily, we see the direct effect of. We see the reflections of the movements in the world. And I wanted to have him just kind of expound on that idea as a foundation for the conversation. So, Stormy, thank you very much for taking time out on a Friday afternoon after the markets close and all that stuff and to shoot the shit for a little while. Appreciate it. How are you?
Happy to be here, man. Very, very happy, especially now as we have reversed all of Liberation Day's gain or losses.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's gonna have to eat their tariff bad free market crow. I am very much looking forward to all of the conversations that I'm going to have next week,
right,
with so many people who thought the world was literally going to end, and we have just destroyed free market capitalism. Ideas that they never, like the rhetorical device I just talked about with you earlier, that's been really helpful for me.
right.
Another one like that is like where these ideas come from. We have a ton of ideas, and when we get introduced to new ones, like foreign ones, or things we haven't seen before, then in that moment we ask, like, where do these ideas come from? Like, whose ideas are they? What are they about? But a lot of the stuff that we have as our ideas that kind of we use to construct our paradigm, we never interrogate the same way. Like, particularly, like I was having I told you yesterday, I had to take a quick trip out to Texas to see something very exciting that's happening in domestic energy production. And
Right.
on the plane with a couple with two dudes that were, longtime fund managers, very successful guys. And I said to them, I was like, the topic of tariffs came up. And I said to them, like, right, where did this come from? Like, where free trade, like free trade being good, like, where did this come from? He's like, what do you mean? Everybody knows this. I'm like, well, you just spent like 30 minutes talking to me about how bad globalism is. Right? Like globalism this, globalists that. Free trade is globalism. That's what it is fundamentally. What you're discussing, what you're talking about is globalism. Free trade, right? That's trade without borders and trade without anything to inhibit the flow of the trade, right? And the trade in labor is as much a trade as anything else. All right, you get a paycheck every day, dear listener, or every week, hopefully, maybe monthly, who knows, because you're trading your labor. So the free market is, in fact, the very thing that makes it okay for me to ship your jobs to China. You can't get angry about one or the other, really, because they are the same thing. Globalism is free trade, but nobody ever examines those ideas. Those ideas didn't come from nowhere. They didn't really come from Adam Smith all that much. But they did come from the Trilateral Commission, which is another one of these black holes.
Yeah. No, well, just to push back a little bit, because I'm gonna have to like do my little libertarian, oh my God, getting the vapors over here. Well, what I'm gonna say is the following, and I don't disagree with you in some aspects of it, which is that I don't actually think we've ever done free trade, because when you have governments creating trade barriers, when you have them when you have corporations and whatnot, and this is where I'm going to sound a little bit like a terrible leftist. You have corporations being able to regulatorily capture, the flow of money and direct it where they need to through the point of a gun. Well, then there's no free market about these things. I think we practiced. I think we were allowed to practice like free markets within very well defined boundaries. Like I
Yeah.
see it as we're all particles in a box created by somebody else. Being a quantum mechanics guy, I understand the first thing you learn in quantum mechanics is how to solve for the motion of a particle in a box. The problem is that these people were all just particles, and those particles are just economic actors, but they've set up the boundary conditions of what the box is allowed to be, where we're allowed to be free traders and where we're not allowed to be free traders, because those boundary conditions then benefit them as they get to pull a vig off of the motion of we the particles inside their box.
I don't fundamentally disagree with that at all. Like I actually think America at its most successful time is exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like the thing about free trade is free trade within a nation, inside of a nation, because free
Sure.
trade is very beneficial to the people that are inside the box. Right.
Sure.
So the number one question that a sovereign has to articulate and answer is, who is inside my box?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And are the people outside my box? Well, there's other boxes out there. And at a nation state level, economics is so much of what actually drives us is not economics, even though, some people will craft whole political philosophies and like modes of being that are crafted around economics. But economics is just a function of what is just something that happens inside of a polity, inside of a nation.
Mm-hmm.
And other nations can be fundamentally hostile to you because those nations may want things that you have, whether that be prosperity, whether that be territory. Either way, the thing that controls the box that those particles inhabit over there has fundamentally different understandings of what it is to be a particle, in existence. The raison d'etre, right?
Right.
The purpose of life. And it's a box's job to create and defend that historically, right? So my particles are going to live as they always have lived inside my box. And inside this box, they are going to be as happy as possible. And the thing that makes them that way is free trade inside. And
Mm-hmm.
domestically, the US, like what's really funny is that the conversation is so twisted because everyone's like, oh, America was most prosperous when we had super high tariffs. This is true. But at the same time, we also had radical free trade
Mm-hmm.
inside the nation.
Right.
Right. So you could, and this was actually a revolutionary act, right? So when Congress was
Mm-hmm.
like, no, we're going to do free trade within states, that was a very big deal. As you can see, Canada doesn't even have free trade between its states.
Yes. Correct.
But you still need to defend your nation from people that, and this is the thing with Adam Smith, is a guy by the name of Frederick List,
Mm-hmm.
who's a naughty economist you're not supposed to learn about. He is the reason that that we had Meiji Japan explode so quickly, right? So Meiji Japan took a country that was literally, dirt floors, huts, all the things, and created an economic powerhouse that if you were to adjust, for inflation and for industrialization, it's larger than China ever was. Right? The industrialized Japan did it like no one ever did it, at least in that part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And Frederick List was a guy that was so excited that the US had finally stopped, civil warring itself into a rough patch. He left Germany and basically stood on the floor on the steps of Congress every day, like yelling until somebody would listen to him. And somebody eventually did, thank God. And this is where you get America's golden age, all of the subsidization of railroad infrastructure.
Right.
Right. All of basically from 1860 to 1930, the US created more wealth than any other nation has ever created in the history of the world. and you
Right.
can argue combined. The reason
Mm-hmm.
for that is we didn't let anybody come in while our industries were growing and developing and basically maintaining their strength.
Mm-hmm.
But inside, 95% of every single good that a US consumer purchased was manufactured from somewhere else inside the United States. And that entire supply chain, right? So all of the from the raw industrial inputs to the industrial products to the finished product was all made inside of state. So you had rabid free trade between all of these participants, from the guy selling the lumber all the way on down.
Mm-hmm.
But you kept out competitors. And List pointed out that he goes, well, List, the reason why List is so troublesome is because at the time in the 1800s, mid 1800s, he embarrassed Adam Smith and basically refuted Adam Smith, because Adam Smith sells Wealth of Nations as this is, look at the British Empire. We got here by free trade. We are the world's economic superpower. And they were. And List pointed out, he goes, well, I hear you say that, but what you're describing is the economic policy that the British Empire has with all foreign nations, and most specifically with all of its colonies. But the home island itself, where all the wealth is and all the industry is the
Mm-hmm.
most protectionist state in the world, and most specifically the most protectionist in the European continent, or in Europe, in the West. So basically, Adam Smith forgot to say that, yeah, protectionism at home, but free trade abroad.
Right.
So all of the colonies, like all of the states, had rabid free trade amongst each other, right? So
Mm-hmm.
anywhere in the British Empire could trade with anywhere in the British Empire, without inhibition or encumbrance. But anybody that wasn't a part of the empire, like let's say that had opposite or opposing interests, like the French Empire and the Dutch Empire, which were very significant at the time, they weren't slouches. They did not get to trade for free. Like the free trade was like a prize, right? Because of the prosperity it creates. Like, this is my prize for my people. They get to do this. You don't get to do this. Which I think we lose in the whole world of in economics, especially as economics as politics. Is, okay, what is the purpose of politics? The purpose of politics can't be economics. So what is it? And the purpose of politics is, you have your people, these are my people, and you have basically their interests. And amongst their interest is not just quality of life and things like that, but history, culture. Like, it's a government's job to perpetuate the people that it rules over
Mm-hmm.
into perpetuity, into the future. Like, you guys are still going to be here for forever, and I'm going to, you elected me, or I'm the king, to make sure that doesn't ever change. And economics is kind of just a part of that, but also so is geostrategic needs, which I think you popularized to great effect. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody ever looked at economics and geopolitics as the same thing, but now we live in a very risky world, and
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of forced to.
Yes.
Right? What's more influential on oil prices next year or this year? Is it the millions of individual discrete transactions between buyers and sellers, one side hoping to get the most value for the lowest amount of money, or the highest amount of value? And you get what I'm saying? Or,
Right.
I'm tired, but or the
There's no worries.
geostrategic needs of Vladimir Putin's Russia. Which one's more important?
Or the geostrategic needs of a globalist captured American government that's taking their orders from an energy starved European colonialist banking sector, which is where I've wound up. No, all of those points are very, very well considered. One of the things that's interesting about the way the framework we've just put together here, while I was listening to you talk, which is that you're correct. You have protectionism at home, radical free trade within, and allowing the allowing our trade partners to invest inside, and then, or worse, this is where the governments have gone wrong. This is why what we call free trade now really is globalism, is because we've allowed certain aspects of our society to be broken down by allowing foreign investors to buy access to direct access to the labor of the people inside the country, i.e., through the sovereign debt. One of the first things, to go back to your basic quantum mechanical thought project, which is the particle in the box. When you solve that using the Schrodinger equation, the Hamiltonian operator, you solve H psi equals E psi for that particle in the box. What you find is that a certain percentage of the time, the particle resides outside the box. This is known as quantum tunneling. So to extend our metaphor just slightly, what I'm actually saying is that that even under the best of circumstances, some of the capital, some of the labor, some of those people, some of the behavior is going to leak outside the box, and that's fine, because that's what makes, in a sense, that's what creates a globalized system. It creates relationships around the world, certainly metaphorically. Now we extend the metaphor, but when
global trade, yes, not globalism.
Right, global trade is one thing, not globalism is something completely different. So what they've done is as they broke down the box, which is supposed to have, it's a box with walls of infinite energy that the particle can't get out of, but somehow it does anyway, which is the fun part. So what makes quantum mechanics fascinating, by the way. But what they've done, of course, is that they've lowered one of the walls of the barrier to allow somebody else to get in and start siphoning the energy, and start siphoning the energy out of that system and into their system. And that's, I guess, okay, if look at it that way. And I think the system really is wealth extraction through debt, and obviously debt slavery. And it's through this centralized taxation, centralized debt issuance, and then the destruction, and then backing the currency with the quote unquote full faith and credit of the particular country, that we're dealing with here. But if you want foreign investors to come in and buy that debt, well, what have you done? You've set up a dynamic where they're getting paid
extract.
Right. They're getting paid an interest. They're getting paid a VIG, an interest rate on my labor.
Yep. And then you outsource the labor. So this is the
and then you outsource the labor.
Yeah, the crazy thing is that Putin has proven, and for the longest, so money is never going to make anything. Money is sterile in and of itself. It doesn't actually do or make anything.
No, it doesn't.
This is what screwed up the British aristocracy so much, because if you live in an isolated box and you won't it leaves your immune system open to certain types of ideas. So when the reason that the British aristocracy got kind of dethroned when so you had the banking.
What period are you
we're
talking
about?
Like
1600s. So we're talking all right. So you had the beef between, this is back when interest was still very, very frowned upon. It was a very unchristian thing to do. So you basically had a warring group between Jewish bankers in Italy and Jewish bankers in Germany. The German ones ended up being successful and actually, kind of largely displaced the ones in Italy. So they didn't just displace them, their ability to lend across the European continent. They also did it in Italy, and they ended up branching out. Everybody knows the story of the Rothschilds first making their entrance into England, but the aristocracy has to be apart from economics, and this is what was never spelt out, right? So aristocracy, the reason that you are an aristocrat, why you get these special privileges, why the noble gets to live in the nice house, is because the noble and all of his sons, right? Their reason for being is to protect all the little people that live in their manor. So if you go to England still, and really all across Europe, you see these grand houses and you see these little towns that exist around the house that's also all there to support the house, right? So that house being there allows a reason for a shoemaker to exist and for a blacksmith to exist and all of these other ancillary things in service of the estate, right? Basically, the Lord being there allows a whole bunch of small businesses to kind of pop up in and around him. And the reason they pop up around him is not just to service him, but it's also safe. He gets to be the aristocrat because he and all of his sons are expected to go out there and kill and or die to protect those little people there. So the aristocracy all throughout Western civilization has been a martial caste.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about martial caste is they have honor cultures, right? So the reason why we like idolize Lord of the Rings, why we idolize all the basically, whether they are real world historical accounts of chivalric orders or, you know, episodes in history that the individuals were basically exemplars of chivalric value, or, you know, through fantasy and C.S. Lewis and guys like Tolkien, is really just, the Lord of the Rings is a love poem, is a love letter written to the chivalric culture of European society.
So I would actually argue of English society.
I 100% agree. I didn't want to be that specific, but it is 100%. 100%.
I think it's very important, especially in light of the way I actually, Stormy, I recommend highly that you sit down and chat with our mutual acquaintance Ian Burlingame on this. He will make the distinction between British and English society. And I know, for example, that Tolkien absolutely idolized the English, you know, what is today known as Little Britain, that the pastoral English countryside was, and he was a royalist in every way. And it's very important to kind of make that distinction. What's that?
He was also a language expert, particularly in like
absolutely
the Welsh and Celtic, basically middle English or Old English, like most of the fantasy languages used by the inhabitants of Middle Earth are derivations of either Celtic or ancient Welsh, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, 100%. It was Britain or England, whichever. Semantics.
England is, I think, England. I'm
Anglo-Saxon.
I've been tasked by a variety of people to tighten up my rhetoric, and for good reason. And I think it's fair that we're now going to make the distinction certainly here between English and British, because British are the ones that were co-opted with the takeover in 1688 of the crown and moving in William Orange, who was Dutch, and yada yada yada. So which is getting to the point that you were making about how the Venetians and the Dutch wormed their way to English society, and then
because the English lords, like these were martial people, like they did combat. So it's very easy for them to be like, hey, I will give you this large sum of money right now for this estate that only produces a small amount of money every year. Obviously, this amount is larger than the small amount your estate puts out every year. Think about all the things you can do with this money.
Right.
And it seems like a very good deal, except for Tom and many of you listeners know assets are always more valuable than money.
Yes.
And they didn't know that. So you basically got the indentured debt slavery and or outright, like, you know, foreclosure of a lot of British aristocracy. And the martial culture, the chivalric culture, was basically kind of stripped out of the society, because whoever holds the aristocratic positions in a society sets the culture. So if you make an aristocracy of people that only value money, you will have a culture that only values money, right? Consumerism is de facto this. And I actually see this in America today. Like if we're talking, this conversation started before we started recording about black holes, and a
Right.
lot of the stuff that Tom talks about and I talk about are black holes, right? So like you can be an astrophysicist and or a cosmologist, unless you're fake astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, who has never published a paper, by the way, nor been cited on any. How
I
are
know.
you a scientist? I
I
mean,
know.
a postdoc is trying to do that. Anyways, you should pay attention to why somebody really wants you to listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson tell you that you are a biological robot in a meaningless universe. Interesting. But anyways,
Oh
Neil
no,
deGrasse
no!
Tyson,
Please, more shitting on Neil fat ass. I can't remember.
he's the
I now
worst.
call him Neil fat ass something. I can't remember what I called him the other day, but that's my new name for him. And yeah, so oh my god, no!
He's a
Please shit
charlatan.
on
He's
him more,
fake.
please.
He's fake. He's not
Oh yeah,
real. He's
absolutely
a
is. Absolutely is.
creation.
It's
And he's
DEI Carl Sagan.
yeah, another guy that published very little work.
I know.
So the guys that actually publish papers, right, that actually do astrophysics and cosmology, they, some of them, especially the ones that are particularly leaning on the physics side, because what Tom is talking about in quantum mechanics is actually a big fight in physics, because
Mm-hmm.
the physics that works on the large scale, the Einsteinian physics, what governs planets, black holes, and many other things, does not work at the very, very small,
No,
like the
it's not.
quantum scale. They literally have different rule sets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really the problem of physics in the last 50 years has been trying to unify that. And
Yes.
who knows if it ever will. I'm leaning very heavily on the electric universe side of those guys. Their work is
So am
very
I.
good.
I am. I think the gravitic model of the universe does not work. Um,
Nope.
uh, it does not work. And yeah, I mean, just so you understand, Stormy, as an undergraduate, I don't know if you know this about me or not, but as an undergraduate, I worked in the with the high energy physics guys within the chemistry department. We were doing foundational.
Oh,
Oh no, I was doing laser ablation and formation and ablation of transition metal rare gas clusters in the gas phase as a 22-year-old, as an undergraduate, working with a man who was literally trying to define the thermodynamic bolt, where that limit is between the
what?
quantum system and the thermodynamic system, where the bond energy, where those numbers. Yeah, dude, I could have easily been a real like have I could have, if I chose my wife, if I chose the PhD over my wife, my life would have been completely different. Probably not as interesting, but and certainly not
Nor
as
is happy.
fulfilling because oh yeah, no, I like I don't talk about this stuff very often anymore, but my understanding
It's a
of this
shame. You're
stuff,
pretty good at it.
yeah, I mean, I don't mind talking about it. It just doesn't come up in conversation all that often, to be honest with you.
No.
But I mean, I got to rant about the goddamn British because it's more important. Like, but understand that yes, that interface where the quantum system ends and where we can start using thermodynamics, which is classical mechanics, Newtonian mechanics, where we
Mm-hmm.
can that interface is a very it's quantifiable eventually on a system by system and on a species by species basis. But and
Question
we
for you
were
then, while I have you, I'm sure it's going to be
sure.
terrible listening for the listeners,
Mm.
but because you're well versed in classical and quantum physics, and we just brought up like, how do you think the electric universe guys kind of stack up when it comes to the functionings of quanta on the quantum scale, right? So is there a similar boundary layer between the
Oh,
two states of physics?
I don't know that. You see, that's the thing. I probably not. That's the thing. I think that's
Mm,
why I don't like the gravitic model of the universe. The more I think
yeah.
about it, is that I
Yes.
think that the electromagnetic or the electromagnetic version of the universe actually is much more holistic. We don't
Hmm.
have to deal with like there's no fudging for dark matter or anything else. The energy's all out there. There's one model refuses to quantify it because their model doesn't allow for it, and another one does. And so once you're
Hmm.
there, like like at the end of the day, we could use quantum mechanics, right, to solve for a guy hitting a baseball bat. Like my undergraduate advisor, who was also my physical chemistry professor, said came in on the first day of a second semester physical chemistry, and said we start with quantum mechanics, and now this is going to be hard for you to wrap your brain around very pithily, because he said, look, the problem with learning quantum mechanics is that we don't play quantum baseball, we play Newtonian baseball. We understand billiards and this and everything else, but at the end of the day,
you teleport,
right, and you can use quantum mechanics to solve for a guy hitting a baseball, but it would be fucking unbelievably tedious. We have better models that work, that the statistically averaged model that we have for these billions of degrees of freedom that exist within the system of a guy hitting a baseball with a bat, like to account for all those degrees of freedom, when every molecule or every atom has 2n+1 degrees of freedom, and n is the coordinate position of each particle. I mean, it's insane. It just it becomes a problem so mathematically tedious that it defies description, when at the end of the day we can very quickly we can use statistics properly to get a good first order approximation. But when we really need to dive into specific interactions, no, we're going to have to use quantum mechanics, and that's the thing. So the universe is fractal in that way, where everything in that respect, like knowledge and everything, you use the right tool for the system under study, is really what it comes down to. It's the same math, but one is a statistically averaged model of the other. And I know some of the cosmologists in the audience will probably get angry with me for saying that, and they probably have good reason.
No, quantum mechanics is the most accurate sets of maths that we've ever produced. It's accurate to 27 decimal places. You have to first engage with its accuracy.
Yes.
And then, basically, I hate when people qualify their statements, but when you're talking about the different things, you have to qualify, like, this is insanely accurate. It's the most accurate thing we've got at the moment.
Right.
So,
and it's also not saying that it's the final, version of reality that we're going to uncover. It is the best model that we have today, and we've used it until proven otherwise. This is what we've got. And
there's some very interesting stuff being coming out of the Pentagon right now in the last 5 years. It's another black hole that we're talking about, like how it's exertion. So the reason I sent Tom and I down a very very off-topic rabbit hole is because a lot of what we describe in our interviews is stuff you can't see. Neil deGrasse Tyson or any other actual physicist can point their telescope, whether it's a radio telescope or a visual, that doesn't matter, and you're searching the sky for black holes. Like, if that's very difficult because you can't see them. Right? Radio waves or light, doesn't matter. You can't. How do you find this thing that you can't detect?
Right.
Well, you look for signatures of how it affects the stars around it. A black hole will move things around it in an unnatural pattern.
Right.
And that's the signal. That's like, oh my God, I can see something is moving these stars around in this way that they're not supposed to move. And I can calculate the divergence between how they're supposed to move and how they're moving. And it gives me an idea of how big that fucking black hole is that I can't see. Like, oh, wow. Well, anyways, this thing must be fucking huge. It's how actually we found out that there's black holes at the center of all of each and every galaxy. And that's what we're basically talking about. Things that you can't directly see, but you can know that they are there if you look for things behaving differently than they normally would. And if you get enough of those fingerprints of how, okay, when it's this thing that I can't see, things move around in this type of way. And if it's this other thing that I can't see, but I know both exist, right? Things move around in a different way, right? So like everybody is talking about like Zionism and Zionist influence on the United States. Well, granted, yes, that ship sailed a long time ago. You know, two different types of Zionists control your foreign policy. Sorry. One has an ethnic hatred for the nation of Russia since 1680, and a pogrom and Kolominsky and all that other stuff, which represented 80% of the Biden administration's cabinet. So the priority for the Biden administration's cabinet, at least the civilian part of it, was conflict with Russia. So basically all of that infrastructure that was there from the Cold War, right? Because the system generally doesn't want, the fucking US government is so goddamn big.
Mm-hmm.
It is impossible for you to just say, oh, we're going to do this today. But the reason that the conflict with Russia was so easy for a very small group of people to, you know, grab a hold of is because the system was already set up for war against the Soviet Union. Everything was already there, ready to go. And a similar thing in the Middle East, right? We did the war on terror for like all of those guns are pointed in the same direction already. It's not very difficult for people to have outsized influence. A small organized minority will always beat out a unorganized majority. This is the problem inherent with democracy, by the way. But anyways,
no, it's what's interesting about what what we're literally talking about here is and again these are geopolitical black holes. When you see somebody acting outside of their normal how they should be acting. Why is the president of the United States not acting in the best interest of America? These are very simple questions you ask yourself. Well, clearly it's because
vandals,
there's outside influence, forces acting upon them. Well, the way I like to make this point like unbelievably clear to everybody, real bankers don't have Wikipedia pages.
Yes.
You don't know who these people are. When people ask me all the time, well, who is Davos? I go, well, Davos are the people that we don't actually know their names of. Why? Because they don't allow themselves to be found. When I was talking to E.M. Burlingame the other day, one of the things that we started discussing was the unseen layer of how capital moves based on these old relationships between families and between companies that go stretch back 200, 300, 400, 500 years. And, we get a glimpse of this stuff when we watch like a James Bond movie. Right. And there's all these dark financiers and these evil people like Lashif from Casino Royale is a classic example in many ways of this type of person. Multiply that by 100, by 500 or 1,000 people, and you realize that there are old institutions and old relationships out there where billions of dollars can move and influence politics, but they're 3, 4, 5 steps removed from the people actually implementing the policy.
Well, I mean, everybody could see this. Everybody, like every leftist will think, every leftist will say, oh, the CEOs, we got to get the CEOs. CEOs are employees.
Mm-hmm.
They're employees of board members, right? Yes. And the chairman of the board is the person that's actually the boss. But is he really? Well, if you look at a board of a major company, you will notice that most of the people on those boards will be lawyers, right? And I have had to serve on a bunch of boards. I know tons of people that, not tons, but I know a handful of people that are too busy to serve on boards, right? So what they do is they have their attorney go, and because the attorney has a legal relationship to always act in their best interest. So right. Especially if you're like a large family, right? Let's say, these 5 siblings, they own collectively X amount of shares. Well, none of them really give a shit about this particular company, right? So they will have, especially if things are held in trust. If things are held in trust, the trustee will then appoint an attorney, and the attorney will vote and act on the board in their best interest. So even the board people are generally proxies for someone else. But then you get some interesting bits, like let's say Jamie Dimon, and this is why guys like Elon Musk and guys like, let's say, Jamie Dimon, why they stand out. In a very rare instance, guys like Henry Ford, in a very rare instance, someone will build a large amount of wealth in a company, or they will build a company that creates a tremendous amount of wealth, and that company and them will have tremendous amount of influence in society.
Right.
Because they never sold their shares, right? So the people that are, the person that is the CEO is also the chairman of the board because he owns that many fucking shares.
Right.
Elon Musk gets to be CEO and chairman because he owns that many fucking shares. Jamie Dimon gets to be CEO and chairman because he owns that many shares. You are actually seeing the power. And this is with Putin. Nobody in Russia has any illusions of who is in charge. The problem with doing any type of foreign policy with the nation of America is you don't know who's actually in charge. And small groups of people like that. That is the realm in which they choose to operate because it is best suited for them and whether their ethnic needs, religious needs, whatever the dividing lines of the faction is, right? This group is better served when nobody knows who's in charge. But then there's another type of government or another type of power structure where you can call it, Machiavelli described them as lions and foxes, right? Lions and foxes have to govern different types of ways. If you're the guy in charge and everybody knows you're in charge, you have accountability. But it also gives you authority, right? Vladimir Putin can wield the ship of state and can call up armies and do all the things. And Russians will do it because that guy has the authority to do it. Have you ever noticed that the US, particularly in the last 2 decades, has had a really hard time justifying its use of martial force in any capacity? It has to justify them under moral grounds, or we have to save democracy or freedom or whatever, because there's no guy that's like actually has the clout to say, like, Stalin didn't have to do that. In fact, Stalin was like, we're doing this today. Everyone's like, okay, we're doing this, right? Lions get to rule one type of way. Foxes have to rule another type of way. But Jamie Dimon owns that many shares. To Tom's point, when you look at that institution and you look at that guy, you're actually dealing with the guy. You see the guy. And with the US, unfortunately, we have even Donald Trump is not the guy. We have fighting black holes. And this is why it's so difficult for people to get their fucking heads around what's happening. And not because they're dumb.
It's not because they're dumb.
Right? I can never figure out why Donald Trump didn't get assassinated before he declared his reelection bid. Why? If you have a problem with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's a threat because they're actively trying to put him in jail, they're raiding Mar-a-Lago, he's going to declare, right? And when he declares, he's going to be the nominee, and then assassinating him or bumping him off, then that's it. Once he's a nominee, now you're affecting the electoral process with your actions. It's going to get so much scrutiny. But Donald Trump, the private citizen, if Donald Trump had an accident in 2021 or 2022, that wouldn't have been a big deal. It would have been a terrible deal. It would have been very, very bad. But Donald Trump, the political candidate, if he had an accident, it's an assassination. I could not understand how this dude was alive after he left office in that 3-year period. I was like, well, how was I can actually
I can actually make a very strong point as to why
somebody's keeping him alive.
No, they kept him alive for one, there was a faction that was keeping him alive. That's one.
Yes.
So the same faction. Fact number one, the same faction that brought him to office the first time was keeping him alive. That's one, because that faction is the same faction that put Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve and John Williams at the Fed and blah, 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 blah. That's one faction. And the other faction, which is why it was prima facie evidence that the faction that we're fighting isn't nearly as strong as it used to be.
Yep.
Right. Now, again, we're looking at the reflections of power here. And then once he becomes the nominee and he's campaigning and they have their plan in motion to then use candidate Trump as a demoralization, a tool for demoralization, that's when they took the shot at him in Butler, Pennsylvania, and they missed. And
Mhm.
I do not in any way, manner, shape, or form at this point say that that was faked or this or that, or these people were
It's
too competent. Why would
impossible.
they? That's all bullshit. That's all nonsense.
Anybody knows
What
anything
happened
about
was,
guns knows that's
yeah,
impossible.
right. It happens. They miss. And guess
Mhm.
what? Then they were scrambling. And then they were on their back foot because they
Mhm.
had their plan. Their plan was Nikki Haley versus Kamala Harris. And
Oh,
that was
100%.
that.
The DNC, the RNC that year, I remember watching the RNC and everyone's like, why is it a bunch of Indian women? Why is it Indian women singing? Why is it Indian women doing this? I don't
Right.
give a,
Because they weren't
it's like a
expecting
Women's Day
Trump to be
celebration.
alive. Right.
Exactly, exactly. Well, because funny enough, that we were actually about to nominate an Indian woman. So this bullshit was supposed to make a lot of sense. And now it doesn't make any sense.
No, now it doesn't make any sense. And now that
Have you ever looked at the board of JP Morgan Chase?
no, I haven't. Um,
You should. I almost want
okay.
to like not talk for a second while you do.
No, let's go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go ahead here. Let's just,
They're all individuals that seem to be Pentagon adjacent,
really,
not civilian intelligence adjacent, but it's an awful lot. It's very interesting. All right. And I've shown this to many, many people because there's certain groups of people that will say, the thing I get the most is that like they're idolaters in a way. Right.
right,
So people that think Zionists control everything. And if anything happens bad, it's because they want it. And anything that happens good, this is just because they're setting me up for something bad.
right,
Right. So you're assigning to a group of people omnipotent power.
yep,
Right. There's nothing that happens that they don't want. And
mhm,
there's everything that happens is because exactly they planned it to be exactly that. Well, the only type of entity that you could ascribe that power to is God.
mm-hmm.
So you were telling me, in fact, that you are the biggest Zionist. And they don't like that one. They don't like that at all.
Dude, not while I'm drawing
Because
on my cigar, but you're not allowed to say something that funny when I'm drawing on my cigar. You're gonna kill me on the
there
podcast.
are if power is real, then de facto competition for that power is real. And if there
Right,
is no competition, then the power isn't real. And if you look at Donald Trump's 20 campaign points, his 20 policy proposal points, whatever, that
right,
Kamala Harris didn't have any, you
right,
can literally go through with a highlighter. You get three different color highlighters, and you can just go through and be like, this is this group, this is this group, this is this other group,
right.
right? And I see military industrial complex,
Mm-hmm.
and I see oil and nat gas. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
forgets that the oil boys in Texas are perfectly capable of putting a man in the fucking White House, a la George Bush.
Yes,
I said 4 highlighters, and you're good. You've
right.
got MIC.
Okay.
You've got the Texas oil boys,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the tech bros,
Mm-hmm.
and you have U.S. finance.
Yes.
And you can literally go through those policy proposals and highlight, and every single one of them will be a agenda point for each one of those groups. Right. So Larry Johnson is Larry Johnson's a very good guy, and not just because he's a guest on Judge Napolitano, but
He's a good friend. Larry's a good
he's
friend.
a great dude.
Yes, he is.
Same, same. He's about as good of a human being as you can get. And
Mm-hmm.
Larry, one night, he and I were talking, and he tells me about um, the technology gap in missile defense between the two. And really, the thing that kept the conflict dyad okay between the US and Russia, right? So basically, why the Cold War never went to blows is because our offensive capabilities were matched by their defensive capabilities, and our defensive capabilities were matched to their offensive capabilities, right? No one could get a one up or a first strike to completely wipe out the other, right? This is the
Mm-hmm.
mutually assured destruction thing. It's actually mutually assured missile defense and mutually assured missile offense.
Right.
And this is how you know that George Bush wasn't necessarily a bad dude. 9/11 had hijacked his administration. Because if you look in the early days of the Bush administration, so you have from the time he was inaugurated all the way to September,
Mm-hmm.
you read anything in the news and just read anything that was coming out of the White House, anything that was coming out of the media, which they controlled back then too. Those 9/11 urban moving systems guys, I believe one of them said in their statements to NYPD when they got arrested, the ones that got caught with the van and all the C4 in it, Ryan Dawson details it. They
Right.
literally say in there, soon we will control your media. Or soon we will buy up all your media, which I think is a very dumb thing to say to the NYPD on that particular day, and then repeat to the FBI. But anyways,
It's funny now. My cousin actually worked.
in NYPD on that day.
Yeah, he was NYPD. He was emergency services. He actually worked the crime. He actually worked the New York City bombing investigation.
Oh, did he get like sick?
No. He's
Oh,
fine.
Jesus.
Um, yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, and no, ex post facto. I mean, but I know that he was involved
But
at some level. I have never really like talked to him directly too deeply about it. But um,
every single every single thing the newspapers, the mag and the television was talking about was missile defense. The day, if you go right back before 9/11, the number one priority of the Pentagon, and it literally said it was the Strategic Defense Initiative numeral uno, was missile defense. Then 9/11 happened, and we got basically sidelined into the Middle East for 2 decades. The
yep.
problem is that the very beginning of the George W. Bush administration, he got out of the what you call it, the whatever the missile treaty was, that we
Yeah.
won't build any more fancy missiles of this particular type.
Yep.
We didn't get to do missile defense because we fucked off in the desert for 20 years. But the
Mm-hmm.
Russians, they did.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a whole bunch of useless technology that we developed about how to defend from IEDs and dumb shit. But the Russians have next generation missile and anti-missile technology.
Yeah.
This basically puts the US in an actual strategic and tactical disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look on that 20 policy proposals of the Defense Administration, you have Donald Trump, and it sounds really stupid the way Donald Trump is like a one-liner machine.
Yes.
So you have to like read it very deliberately. Everyone's thinking like, oh, he like, what is he talking about? Or this sounds dumb. Take it very, very literally. So he references things that regular people will understand, and then attaches those things as a metaphor to something that is very serious. So he will say Iron Dome for America. I believe that's number like 15 or whatever on his list
Mm-hmm.
of the 20 policy proposals. What that actually means is Star Wars 2.0.
Right.
We are well behind on, well, the hypersonic missiles is just the tip of the fucking iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
But when he's saying Iron Dome for America, what he's saying is we are going to dump a metric fuck ton of money into defense technology because we are actually behind the 8 ball when it comes to defense tech. Our armies and our military is very, very large and larger than anybody else's. But if the tech is behind, then the strategic advantage shifts. Right? Then you see energy independence again, and then you see, and this is why Mark Andreessen and a bunch of others are always talking about drone tech, robotics, and always in the element of defense.
Yeah.
Right. And we've seen the missile defense thing come to light full force in Ukraine, really. And then also now in the Red Sea. But you can basically outline each one of these factions. And then you start to see in certain areas, like at JP Morgan, they overlap. Right.
Yeah.
So in JP Morgan's board, the Pentagon types and another thing, one of these black hole moments, I think actually it was you or one of your guests that pointed it out once, was that, Biden goes to Poland and says, this time next year, we're going to speaking to US troops, this time next year, you boys are going to be in Ukraine. And then the very next day, someone from the Joint Chiefs, spokesperson for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who you never hear, who you never see on fucking TV, Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Right.
You really, like, you'll see retired generals, but only certain ones, right? So a couple military brass types straightened me out on the different types of generals. And basically the ones that, like, we have literally like bullshit, make work generalships now.
Right.
And those are the
Right.
ones that always end up on the television,
Mm-hmm.
shilling for various defense contractors.
Right.
But the actual Joint Chiefs of Staff, you fucking never see. So a spokesperson for the Joint Chiefs of Staff coming out and saying everything that the president said yesterday was bullshit. And then the very next day, the spokesperson for the White House comes out and says everything the president said the day before yesterday was in fact bullshit. I was like, I've never seen that before.
Right.
That's very interesting. So something weird's happening, and you're watching as this Ukraine thing plays out. You get the distinct impression that part of the U.S. government very much wants to go to war with Russia, and another part very much does not.
Yep.
And we saw the exact same thing in the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm.
Obama wanted to go to war in Syria.
Yep.
Right. And he was working with the CIA and MI6 to do this. Gray Zone did some great reporting.
Mm-hmm.
In Syria was in fact white hats, which Israel, the US, and MI6, or sorry, US intelligence, were funding. And it was the white hats that did this chemical gas attack. And that was supposed to be the casus belli to give Obama basically the go ahead to go invade Syria. And the Pentagon did not want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So what did the Pentagon do? All you have to do, dear listeners, type into your search browser of choice, Pentagon militia kills CIA militia, and see what comes up. So the Pentagon was like, oh, well, we don't want to do this. So they got a bunch of militia people from the Middle East, trained them up in relatively short order. You could argue they're probably already trained, swung by the ammunitions and armaments depot that we keep in Saudi Arabia, which is massive, and hooked these guys up with the top levels of US military tech and small arms. And they basically wiped out the CIA, Mossad, and MI6's little pet militia people in like literally 2 weeks. So the Pentagon basically contracted an army and used that to wipe out the CIA's people in the theater. That means that those two people didn't have identical agendas. You could even say diametrically opposed.
You could also go back to that moment in time when Obama was putting the coalition of the willing together to go into Syria. Why that actually fell apart was the Tories moved against David Cameron.
Yep.
In the parliament, because this is how I described the day I became a geopolitical analyst was when my wife read that headline off of the Drudge Report to me, and I went, say that again. And the Tories stood up and defied David Cameron and said, we're not going to war. So this was an expression of probably now this is the Pentagon putting pressure on British Parliament to go against the globalists, David Cameron and Barack Obama being, two sides of the same quote unquote Davosian coin that wanted this war in the Middle East. Take it, again, the things we see.
No, that's very interesting because Alex Craner pointed out that the Nord Stream pipeline, when the Nord Stream pipeline blew up, he did a really interesting bit of analysis, pointing out like that Polish Minister of Defense person was actually like a scholarship kid to Oxford.
Yeah, Radek Sikorski.
Yeah, was in this very elite club called the Bowlington Club. Bowlington Club is like Skull and Bones, and you have to be basically pledged in. And the person that pledged him was then young Boris Johnson. And there was only I think there's 5 members for every class. So, or 4 members for, I can't remember. It's very small. It's like 25 people at any given time. So from freshman to junior, whatever, there's only 4 or 5 of each class here. And funny enough, the other four people that would have all had to vote and say, yes, we want this Polish man with no academic achievements or no athletic achievements and
Right.
really no family achievements, this no-name Polish person, we would like them in our super special secret club, please, were one young David Cameron and one young Natty Rothschild, who, funny enough, would later go on to own that very, very, very poorly announced pipeline that went live from Norway to Poland on the exact same day that Nord Stream blew up. Interesting.
You can't make this shit up, right? Yeah, no,
No, colleges, man, they're important.
yeah, no, the relationships matter, and which is really funny. And to remind everybody that it was because of that vote that Cameron lost, and what happened there is what set us in motion for Brexit. In order for
Oh, yeah.
Cameron to stay in power, he had to promise the Tories at that point a Brexit vote. Now, start to really think through what was actually happening here. This now really validates. Now we bring all this together. It really validates this whole argument that Ian Burlingame makes about the Dutch takeover of the city of London and the crown and everything else. That this was the beginning of the fight of the strike back from the old British, the old English aristocracy, led by Elizabeth, led by Queen Elizabeth, to start the process of separating England from the European Union. And that's why she brought Trump to. That's why she brought Trump in for a state visit. It's why the fucking world lost their mind that this uncouth man was going to meet with the Queen, even though it was the Queen that invited him, for fuck's sake. Like, they knew this all tracks, dude. This
Well, what did
all.
Obama do afterwards? He
Yeah, he said
immediately
that.
came back and he purged the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Brilliant point.
Obama went
Continued
through like a hatchet
continued
man
purging
and
the
got rid of
Pentagon.
all of the people.
Yeah.
Yes, but what did all those people do? And this is my point, because everyone will be like,
Mm.
oh, I look at the Pentagon on TV and I just see a bunch of faggots with pink hair and whatever. But then you hear Donald Trump say, oh, I've got generals, not like those generals, but I've got real generals. What
Mm-hmm.
is he talking about? What is he actually saying?
Yeah.
Well, all of the people that President Obama purged didn't really like. So, okay, so the thing about the US military is something that's very interesting is that a general basically rules over a sovereign fiefdom,
Yeah.
right? Anywhere between, 20 to 50,000 people, right, that work just under him.
Mm-hmm.
He gets to do whatever the fuck he wants to with, right? And he gets a budget that nobody can ask any questions about or really what he spends it on. So a lot of these black projects, these classified projects, those special access programs, a general will basically run them any like okay. So when everybody found out Obama wasn't exactly subtle, so in the process of him going around and basically, knocking on doors at the Pentagon and saying you're fired, they didn't exactly just sit there and go, oh, I guess I'll just wait for Barack Obama to come down and fire me today. No, they
Right.
took the special access programs that they were already running in their little fiefdoms and incorporated them as private companies. Right? You have right after the Obama administration and during the Obama administration, the amount of small, privately held defense or defense related or intelligence related companies that spin up, right? All of the generals that were fired or purged, and really like guys like Larry Johnson were purged in the Obama
Mm-hmm.
administration,
Mm-hmm.
right? It really all of the good people, I would say, not all good people, but a bunch were purged.
Right.
And they just took whatever they were doing in the military and threw an incorporation on it. And right now, I talk to friends that are, in special forces, and they're like, yeah, the US military can't do anything itself anymore. It's all of these private contractors that do even some of the most basic stuff to the most advanced and most top secret stuff. But it's not like these are like, entrepreneurs that started these companies. The people that started the companies, the people that are in charge of these companies, are the same military brass that were running these programs when they were inside the Pentagon.
Right.
So now, thanks to Obama, you have this group of guys with an axe to grind that are now have unlimited freedom, right? So they have their own, the president can't tell them what to do. Nobody can say, I would like to request this information, or I would like you to stop doing this thing. But no, go fuck yourself. We basically took the guys that were working on the super secret squirrel shit, and now they are out on their own, and all got pushed out for a similar reason by the same people. And these companies are now worth billions of dollars. So to not recognize that as a faction of power,
Right.
and why guys like Eric Prince are now suddenly back on the scene, would be very, very foolish. And that's why I think Donald Trump is still alive.
Yes.
Right. And if you look right before October 7th, this is actually really, really funny, because the two things that the Pentagon does not want to do is the Pentagon does not want to go to war in the Middle East. It actually wants to extricate itself from the Middle East. And it does not want to go to war. And particularly, it wants to extricate itself from Europe.
Yes.
Right. We need to get all of the particles back in the box.
Yep.
As fast as possible.
No, they tunneled out all around the world. They need to come home. Agreed. Fascinating. Yeah, no, it's very clear.
Literally. And if you look, type in like US military or Pentagon pulls out of Middle East, and then set your search browser, do custom search to before October 7th. If you use DuckDuckGo, it's right up in the top corner. DuckDuckGo sucks. Yandex is better. Right. It's funny. All the free speech people should probably tell me why I have to use the Russian search engine to get fucking anything. But anyways, if you do a custom search by date and you do before October 7th, all you will see is every foreign policy and regime fucking media screeching at the top of its lungs why the Pentagon should not, basically leaving the Middle East would be a disaster. And
Right.
Well, if why are you all saying this? If Tom was like, hey, Stormy, don't go to the store. Don't go to the store. It'd be a bad idea if you go to the store. I'd be like, well, I guess he sure thinks that I'm going to go to the store.
Right.
Or why are you saying this? Like, you sound
right.
And every single, like, from Foreign Policy Magazine, Council on Foreign Relations, National Review, just all of it. The Pentagon was planning on pulling out of the Middle East right before October 7th.
Right.
And if I was Benjamin Netanyahu, that would put me in a really precarious spot.
Yep, it really would.
And who are the people? Who are the people that control the Likud party? For all of the people that, rant about Zionists as much as they do, they actually have a lot in common with the average Israeli, right? If I ask an Israeli, like, what do you, like, what's going on? Like, what is your problem with politics? Because trust me, they'll tell you if you ask them. They'll say, oh, well, a bunch of Zionist billionaires in America basically strong arm or bribe the US government into controlling my politics.
Right.
Because the Likud party has less than a 10%, or it was like 11% support. It's a coalition government.
Right.
It had to make pacts with the actual like religious crazies. So Likud has dwindled down in support. And Benjamin Netanyahu is really the head of that political apparatus. So he has very little to no domestic support whatsoever off the electorate. The only people that really support him through the US and via the US. And which is funny, and what really outrages Israeli Jews is these people that do all this, they don't fucking live in Israel. They don't want to. They want to live in Las Vegas or Los Angeles. Like, okay, so you're going to stay over there and you're not going to live over here, but you're going to spend considerable amount of money and do Jeffrey Epstein type shit to control my politics over here. to keep this guy in power that has no support here, the place that you don't want to live. Like, I can see them, everyone that's basically talking about like APACs, and like you put those two Americans and the Israelis together, those group of people have a lot in common. Their political problems are literally identical.
Yep. Right. Yep. No,
because it's really, anyways, it's kind of funny because those people that we're seeing, like everyone is noticing APAC has way too much influence on US foreign policy and really US lawmakers, which is good because people should start asking questions about dual citizenships. You will find out there's a whole bunch of Chinese citizens in our Congress. There's a whole bunch of Indian dual citizens. And really, we're the only nation that does not make you. And really, when you get into like the federal bureaucracy, it's even worse.
Oh, yeah.
Like somebody pointed out the other day that 80% of the fucking judges in DC weren't born here.
I didn't even
almost
know
all
that.
the judges in the DC district
are
dual citizens.
Or poos.
Because in the 60s, we thought it would be a good idea to let sunset the fucking law that says you couldn't be a citizen to any other fucking nation. Right?
Well,
because conservatives that conserve nothing.
Yes.
Right? I can go to a conservative politician, pick one at random, and say, what is an American? What is an American? What does he look like? And they're like, oh, an American can be anyone. They could look like Vivek Ramaswamy here, the fucking IPO scammer, and or whatever. Or they could look like they could be a Chinese American. If I go to China and I sneak up behind a Chinese guy and I cover his eyeballs and I say, guess who? And he'll go, oh, fuck, it's an American. What image does that Chinese guy have in his head?
Right. It's
is it
not
a guy like Tom, or is it like Vivek Ramaswamy or some other things? So how is a Chinese guy better at identifying who the fucking American is than everyone in the GOP?
Yep.
Sorry.
It's a
huge problem because
we go ahead.
No, we can't identify who belongs in our box and who doesn't, and who the government people need to take care of. Yep. And because of that, we have a whole bunch of people in Congress with foreign citizenships.
No loyalty.
Ilhan Omar gets up when she goes to her home district. She tells her home district, a place full of Somalians. Don't ask me how they got there. I'll get angry.
Oh, I know how they got there.
She'll tell you, the Somalians, hey, I am going to Congress. I'm going to make sure we're doing I am representing the best interest. She'll literally say, I am representing Somalia in her campaign speeches. And I can basically go across the list. So the problem with America is that a whole bunch of people that are in the apparatus now are particles from other people's boxes. And they keep opening up all the box, and all the money and the energy and the other particles fall.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And that was part of that was always the plan. It's always the part of the late stage. It's always part of the late stage of the takeover and the destruction, the liquidation of the country. We are at the
you need to kill nationalism.
We're at that very perilous moment where we can win this moment, because now when you get to the late stage of the process, where we are now, when you get there, that's when you can have the potential for a critical mass of people to actually understand what's happening. Now you have to have the right leader to be able to flip the tables. And in the case of the United States, Russia is a perfect example. Ian and I went over this yesterday or the other day in the last episode, which is that, Putin was brought in at the very last moment by the oligarchs to stabilize Russia. Xi was brought in China at the last moment to stabilize China and to in China's case, isolate the foreign money and trap it there and then destroy it, which is what he's done, by the way. And same thing with Russia. Putin 100%. Did the same thing.
Don't you find it interesting that the European pension funds were the only people, like, so basically the bureaucrats at the ECB and in Brussels, nobody wanted to buy negative interest rate suicide bonds. Sorry, why would I want to buy that? You're going to take money out of my bank account? Like, no.
Right.
So they forced the European pension funds to buy them. And so now everyone's pension in Europe has been yielding negative. I mean, Tom knows, everybody, a lot of sophisticated investors will tell you a pension fund needs to pull down 8% to break even.
Right. So
which out of 10-year and suicide bonds, yield 10 years after suicide bonds, all of a sudden, asset-backed 11% interest Chinese real estate bonds look really fucking good.
That's right. And here's the other side of that is, now you know why Christine Lagarde is having to do yield curve control on the entire European sovereign bond market, as Jerome Powell was raising rates all through 2022 to 2024, because what he was doing was pulling everybody's bond yields up, which is driving the bond prices down. All of these bonds were put into these pension funds at historically high prices. Negative yields, high prices, right? Bond math is inverted. So now these bonds are all underwater. Now all these pension funds are underwater, and now all the banks are underwater, and their balance sheets are all hollowed out. And Lagarde has done, and that's why Lagarde and Yellen were running a mutual yield curve control program on both the U.S. debt and the rest of, and by extension, all of Europe's debt, in order to keep this situation from degrading further. What they also did at the same time, and to do that, in order to run that program, we had to run an unbelievable freaking budget deficit and issuing all these bonds in order to try and manipulate the yield curve, which is why she issued all ones and twos. And we're staring at a massive funding rollover this summer, all Janet Yellen's fault, in order to help Christine Lagarde out, who is now staring at, and what did she do? And what did everybody do? And what did Mark Carney tell the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada and everybody else to do?
No, Biden was releasing the SPR.
Oh, well, he's doing that too, in order to get
the SPR to keep energy prices to stop inflation, to give Lagarde the room to fuck with the basically energy prices. Yeah, so basically energy prices, largest driver of inflation, dear listeners. I'm sure if you're a Tom listener, you already fucking know that. We were keeping oil prices down to stop European inflation, to give Christine Lagarde a little bit more room to do exactly what Tom is talking about now.
And now and then over the course of that time, buy a fucking ass ton of American sovereign debt in order to keep the cap on European bond yields. I would watch this on a day-to-day basis, and I'd watch her. There's some days when she lost control of it because she's capping German yields, and that meant that the euro had to crash, and then they would reverse the trade here and there, and they would do all this stuff. So look, now we're at that moment where Trump is a fascinating character, because I know he wants Powell to cut rates in order to spur the wave of investment and get everything running again. But he needs to, but he also knows that Powell, I guess he's got Bessent standing on his shoulder going, no, we can't do that yet. Jerome's got to keep the interest rates high for another so long until we finally can push them into we can really start to push them into crisis mode, which is now why everybody out there, everybody listening to my voice right now, is wrong about the Ukrainian mineral deal. That was a blocking move to keep Europe out of fucking Ukraine for the next 50 years. We own it. It's ours, and we're going to stabilize it. We're going to dismantle this Nazi Zionist fucking horseshit structure that they built there. We're not going to war over it. Everybody is wrong, and Europe is being walled off and forced into a zero collateral arrangement where they've declared war on all of their commodity suppliers. Yep. They've declared war on all of them: Northern, Central Africa, Russia, the United States, everybody. And all they've been able to do is secure Canada for now. But all of the resource riches in Canada want to secede and join the United States.
It's so funny because
y'all lose.
Watching the Carney election makes you realize that because of how thoroughly, and I don't blame the boomers. It's not their fault. If you grew up in a time when news was only on the television for 1 hour there was only 3 channels, and for 1 hour they all said the same thing. Like your only knowledge of the world was given to you by people that hate you, and it's not your fault.
Right.
Right. And the worldview, the music that you were fed, like all of it,
Right.
the whole paradigm that was constructed. So it's not their fault.
No, it's
But
not.
the reason why I wanted to bring up the boomers is in 2025, it is obvious that all of politics is basically war against the television.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because all of the people in Canada that voted that guy in did it because the television told them that
Yep.
Trump bad. Right. So it shows you the level of programming to vote so against your interest. Well, actually, I don't know. Polabar is kind of a faggot, to be honest with you.
Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
like you're going to try and run on this conservative Donald Trump kind of S ticket, but then go to like the Indians and say like, we actually need infinity more Indian immigration. Well, I'm sorry, these people
Canada's
send
already
all their money
44%.
home
Yeah, Canada's already 44% non-native in the first place. They've already been friggin' replaced, these people.
in less than 10 years.
I know.
Who you are, listener, as a people matters.
Yes.
Right. It shapes your whole worldview. The people that come from different places have different languages. Right. If you notice when the chips are down and everyone will be like, oh, Stormy, you're mean, or oh, that's bullshit. And everyone will tell me the exception. Right. But not realize they're proving the fucking rule.
Right.
Right. Look at the MOS, look at combat MOS in the military. Right. So people, not people that join the military, but people that are willing to die, those people, they're 96% one kind of American.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the problem that Britain is having, right? So all of these liberal illusions, all of these liberal ideas, right? They don't work. And not only do they not work, they're insulting. And they should be insulting to you no matter where you come from.
Yes.
If you are an Indian in America, the idea that you would abandon everything of your cultural heritage, you would forget your people, you would forget your grandparents, your great grandparents, their faith, their values, right? The history and culture of your people. You would just forget that and say, I have no affinity and no love for any of it. I am going to adopt this new thing to be an American, right? I'm going to adopt foreign values, foreign cultures that were built by people that weren't my people, my grandparents, my great grandparents, their faith, right? To say that you would for people to say that they expect other people to be able to do that is insulting.
Mm-hmm.
To think that these people and themselves, they don't realize that it's also themselves, to think that all of your history, your culture, right, your whole paradigm is so cheap that a person can choose to throw it away when they cross U.S. lines is insulting. It means you know very little about how people actually work and what actually matters. Because, well, frankly, Canada has given being just a what did a friend of mine said it beautifully. I can't remember. A non-ethnic consumption zone.
Yeah. That's what
And
they want.
that's
everywhere. That's the model of the globalists.
Yeah, they want an international air. Well, yeah, it seems that they are very, very, very for everyone just being a big brown soup. Multiculturalism is anti-culturalism.
Yes.
Right. So if every culture can come together, then if every culture can just give itself up and then just adopt a new culture, then no culture matters.
Yeah.
Right. So multiculturalism is in fact the death of culture, including your own.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to like what Tom is talking about, we're actually talking about, nations going to war. Men don't die for ideas. They will die for ideals with an L.
Yes.
And that's the problem that all of these nations accept for nations that have maintained this natural and national identity, they can go to war just fucking fine. A Russian on the front lines in Ukraine will happily lay down his life because the thing that he is fighting for represents him and the sum total of his ancestors. Like that means he is a part of something greater in a chain of being that stretches back far longer than he can even measure, right? A type of collective consciousness. But if you notice, places like Britain, places like Europe, and places like now like the US, those men won't fight.
Nope.
Why would you?
Right.
What are you fighting for? Like, what actually are you even fighting for? So now this cultural soup that someone has tried to make America is now a strategic and immediate tactical problem for the people in America that fight America's wars. Nationalism is the antithesis of national defense.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in the national defense business, this is a problem.
Yeah, it is.
Not, I mean, not just the fact, all like, you know, I talked to a friend of mine who's a former Delta Force guy. And I was like, hey, man, all of this shit about like, you know, North Koreans beating the country, could sabotage and whatever. I'm like, how much of this is just bullshit? And after like 30 minutes of talking to him, I was like, I had to stop. I'm like, okay, I fucking get it. And he goes, do you? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, are you worried? And I was like, well, yeah, now, thank you. He goes, okay, so you get it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a strategic and immediate, like tactical on the ground nightmare. So I imagine that the tech people are probably not big fans of the ending of the H-1B. I mean, really, it's criminal, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
We told a bunch of young men and young women that they need to go to college. And if they don't go to college, they don't get a job. They don't get a good job. But by the time they get out of college, they've already had 2 financial crises and are saddled with about 200 grand worth of debt that they can't even pay off. They can't even discharge in bankruptcy.
Nope.
Right? Debt that's stronger than credit card debt that they signed up for when they were 17 or 18. Half of them not even able to buy a pack of cigarettes or sign up for the military or any of that shit. We expected them to just, you know, shoulder $200,000 of debt and not actually and fully understand what A, compound interest is, which they don't teach you in school anymore.
Nope.
And B, what non-dischargeable means.
Yep.
And then by the time they graduate, they find out that these fancy jobs that they went to school for have in fact been taken on by H-1B people because they can pay them less.
Yep.
Right? If you make your system a scam, no one will want to play.
I can tell you that being the father of a 19-year-old just entering the workforce, I know what her ethos is. She knows it's all a scam. And she didn't get it from me. Hey, believe it or not. She didn't. She just understands. They all do. They all get it. And they're not going.
Is she nihilistic in a way?
And a little bit, but I'm working on that. So,
okay.
But as a matter of fact, she's waiting on me for dinner. So what I'm gonna do now is find it. No,
you should kick me off.
What I'm going to say is I'm going to find a graceful way to end this podcast, which is to say this has been great and it's been wonderful. And we'll definitely pick it up again. This is what we have to figure out is what it is that we are fighting for. I know what I'm fighting for. I know what you're fighting for. And I've told her that even if you don't agree with all the things that are happening right now, because you can't see what we see. It's incumbent upon me as your dad, unlike the fucking boomers who are like, why should I preserve my wealth for my kids? Why shouldn't I spend it all? Like, what did they ever do? Well, they never liked their fucking kids in the first place. So, you know, what a shock. That's the boomer mentality. And I'll get news for you. That was part of the program as well. But what I keep telling her is that as your dad, I will fight for you, even when you don't want me to fight for you. Because that's my job. And even when you don't understand why it is that I do what I do, why I do it, and how I do it, and the positions that I hold. it's because, and everything I do is in service of that. She does understand, and at the very minimum, I know that she understands my sincerity, even if she disagrees.
Patriarchy is
which is all to the better. It's all that matters. So,
being a patriarchy is duty, right? It's not privilege.
Yeah.
The guy that is in charge is only in charge because he is the guy that has to fulfill the things that are hard.
Yes.
It's like rights. Everyone's like, oh, well, I have rights to do this and rights to do that. Rights are privileges, right? Rewarded for duties. Like it is impossible to have a right without a duty. And parents, for instance, you have a duty, and as a citizen, you have and it's actually those duties that give you purpose. Being the guy in the castle isn't fulfilling to the Lord. If you remove the peasants, if there were no peasants in his little fiefdom, then he would be without purpose.
Mm-hmm.
His life would literally be pointless.
Correct.
All right. So yeah, duty is really a lot more fulfilling than anything else, really. So I think as a country, we need to get back to that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Anyways,
completely.
I will let you go to dinner and shut up.
No, it's all good, man. And I agree. And what we'll do is we will pick this up again. But Stormy Waters, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed every minute of it, and I'm glad you and I hooked up and did the thing. And we'll do it again another time.
Yeah.
So if you want to let anybody know where you hang out and what you do, or you want to plug yourself in some other way, you go right ahead and do so, and then we'll get the fuck out the door and we'll pick it up again.
I don't have anything to plug. I produce no content. If you want to support me, which is apparently what I'm supposed to say, please subscribe to Tom and subscribe to his newsletter and support the people that you actually trust, and you kind of need to support them, right? The shit that's bad for you is the shit that they try and give you for free, right? There's a reason why you can turn on the TV and the news is just there. But you can follow me at Norman_Dodd new, or just type in Stormy Waters on Twitter and I'll be the first one that pops up.
There you go.
It's not hard to find. But yeah, don't produce any content, don't have a Substack, don't have a podcast, but sometimes I go on Twitter.
Yeah, you do. All right, man. As always, I'm TFL1728 on Twitter. We're an even worse version of me. We'll show up every day. Patreon, if you want to support. Thank you, Stormy, for the lovely recommendation. You can support us at Patreon/Gold Goats and Guns. Blogs at tomluongo.me. The podcast will be posted there as well as everywhere else. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.